Um, Jeannie, I'd like to thank you for that introduction. And folks, I have to say that most of what she said about me is true. But before I start smithing the word that we've chosen for you today, I'd like to offer congratulations and cheers to you on your 50 years. On this eve of the wrap up to the Northern Plains annual meeting, I really commend you on your commitment to an organization that's been viable and necessary for a half century now. And considering the relative youth of our state of Montana, that is really an achievement. Well, I am not a member of Northern Plains, but I know for certain that as a native Montanan, I know many of you personally. In fact, I see some familiar faces there in the squares. Hi, everybody. So we're all in the cybersphere, not easy for me to say, the cybersphere this evening. And I'm sure like many of you, I really wish we could be together in person tonight to shake hands and to speak face to face and share a drink together. And speaking of that, I want to offer kudos to the Northern Plains staff for facing the many challenges of hosting and organizing this online meeting. I know that there are some very special challenges involved. We hope that maybe next year your meeting will look a little more traditional. So we remain optimistic, right? Can't hurt and might help. Well, Jeannie already introduced me as host of Chrysti the Wordsmith radio series, but I know that there are some out there who are not public radio listeners. So I'd sort of like to flesh that introduction out a little bit and let you know maybe why the heck I'm here as a non-member of Northern Plains. 31 years ago, when I was a student at Montana State University studying anthropology of all things, I started a radio series at KGLT about the origins and histories of words and phrases in the English language, because I've always been a dictionary lover and reader, a lover of language. Anthropology also sort of boosted me into linguistics, which is another part of word study. In those 31 years, my radio series, which is only 2 minutes per series, it's become what's known in the radio biz as an interstitial radio series. You can hear it throughout Montana on Yellowstone Public Radio here in Billings, and Montana Public Radio in Missoula. So really the only town in Montana that does not get my radio series is my hometown of Poplar. Irony of ironies, right? But as host of the series, I find real delight in smithing words and phrases that are familiar to us as American English speakers. And occasionally I get invited to study words peculiar to clubs and businesses and organizations, looking at those key words and phrases from an etymological perspective, which brings me here with you tonight. So as you're wrapping up your annual meeting, I'd like you to take some linguistic inspiration with you into the next year, because I truly believe the more we know about the words and the phrases we use to describe ourselves and the organizations we belong to, the more empowered and confident and joyful we feel to describe ourselves. So when Claire and I discussed the words that are used to embody the spirit of Northern Plains, we hit bingo on grassroots, which is a term often used to describe organizations such as Northern Plains Resource Council, which are motivated by the people from the ground up. Grassroots is a term that's actually embedded in your mission statement, which reads in part, Northern Plains Resource Council is a grassroots conservation and family agriculture group. And Claire's very title is Grassroots Outreach Coordinator. So the word grassroots is around in your organization. And Claire and I agreed that the word is relevant and intriguing and really worth a closer look. I feel that we all have an intuitive notion of the meaning of the word grassroots, in that it somehow labels an organization composed of citizens and neighbors and communities united toward a common goal, something very much like that. Now, when I do my radio series, or when I do presentations like this, I'm not a big fan of reading formal dictionary definitions, but I feel in this case, it's appropriate to read a formal dictionary definition of the word grassroots. And so I went through several of my dictionaries here at home. I have several paper dictionaries. I subscribe to a lot of online dictionaries as well. And I found a really good one at the website vocabulary.com, which is a website I visit often for inspiration. And I found what I thought was the best, the simplest, the most understandable definition of the word grassroots. And it says, as an adjective, it's of or involving the common people as constituting a fundamental political and economic group. And then it goes on to say, something grassroots is at the most basic level, down there in the dirt with the roots of an idea or an activity. If you're looking to make a change from the ground up, start at the grassroots. And I found this a really efficient definition and has some good illustrative sentences, which are always helpful. But I like to give the term a bit more color. We can all think of all kinds of useful metaphors that grass and its roots provides to give us grassroots as a meaningful term. And because I am who I am, I love me a good metaphor. And I hope you will indulge me for a moment with some metaphors I came up with when I started to contemplate the word grassroots. So here we go. The term relies on the ubiquity of grass on the land masses of our planet, also the utility of grass to nourish many of the Earth's creatures, including ourselves, and here in Montana, the creatures that many rely upon for a livelihood. Grass and its roots, as we know, stabilize the very soil we live on. And last, if we liken grass to common everyday folks, blades of grass on the earth far outnumber the more extravagant and towering and obvious species, such as trees, for example. And so this paints a picture of more power in numbers than in form or appearance. Okay. Chrysti the Wordsmith, we get it. Metaphors. Let's move on. Let's dig into the life history of this term. This is where it really gets good. When I research the origin of a word, I like to do a few things. One, I like to ascertain a word's chronology or the date of its first printed appearance, and how and if we as English speakers change that word over time. And then, icing on the cake, I feel that I hit pay dirt if the circumstances of the word's coinage happens to show up somewhere and I can verify it from several different sources. So for those details, I turn to the online Oxford English Dictionary, which I consider the sharpest tool in my kit. And the Oxford English Dictionary, in the case of this word, tells us that the term grassroots, in its figurative sense, appeared in American publications around the turn of the 20th century. Most specifically, right after the presidential election of 1912, when Teddy Roosevelt lost the White House to Woodrow Wilson. In McClure's magazine of July 1912, someone wrote of the presidential outcome this way, and here I'm quoting, "From the Roosevelt standpoint especially, it was a campaign from the grassroots up, The voter was the thing. And here in this, this couple of sentences, the term grassroots is encased in quotation marks, which is often an emblem of the word being used in a new sense, or actually a brand new word printed for in its infancy, and that it's a signal that a lot of people may not understand that term as it's printed. Then someone quoted in the Ada, Oklahoma Evening News of January 1912 that said, "The grassroots were for ex-President Roosevelt." And here the word grassroots has been hyphenated, grass hyphenated, hyphen roots. And it's clear from the context that grassroots means the common electorate, the common people. Because the term was clustered around that presidential race, it's possible that Roosevelt or someone in his campaign team may have innovated the use of the word in its common people sense. But there's no direct evidence of that, so we can't say it with any certainty. The term grassroots nevertheless gained traction throughout the 20th century and seemed to hover around politics. It eventually landed fairly solidly on the notion that such groups encourage the people to vote or participate in a movement through narrow communications, such as mailers, emails, meetings, and phone calls, rather than broadcast media. And that's kind of where it stands today. So, one of the delights of doing word research is the serendipitous discovery of new words along the way. And you should have heard me whoop, and I might even have squealed when I came across the evil twin of our wonderful adjective grassroots. And that word is, and I heard it for the first time, or read it for the first time just days ago, astroturfing, astroturfing. Astroturfing in politics is attempting to manufacture a false illusion of widespread grassroots public opinion for or against a particular candidate, legislative measure, or cause, when in reality, these campaigns may be orchestrated by corporations, lobbyists, or labor unions. I love this term because, one, we can know so much about it, and two, because it is so outstandingly brilliant. So, number one, the term astroturf, or fake grass, was coined in 1966 because it was first used in the Houston Astrodome, which was named in turn because Houston was the control center of the US space program, hence the prefix astro, right? And then 20 years later, in 1985, the Washington Post carried an interesting story about Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen. And the Post said, and this is quoting Lloyd Bentsen, "A fella from Texas can tell the difference between grassroots and astroturf," Bentsen said of his mountain of cards and letters from opponents of the insurance provision. "This is generated mail," he said. So Lloyd Bentsen cleverly, I must say, appropriated the term astroturf in opposition to the more organic grassroots that describes a movement arising spontaneously from fertile soil. And there's another metaphor for you. And his term made a big dent in the political world. In very short order, journalists from England and Australia and Canada picked that term up, and I found examples in the Oxford English Dictionary where journalists from those three countries used astroturfing in their writing. And so we have Senator Bentsen to thank for coining a term that in opposition makes grassroots seem greener, more attractive, and more appealing than it did before astroturfing. And so I want to leave you to think about those two terms that are extremely delightful to me. They've become good friends. It is my intention to take those two terms and turn them into a Chrysti the Wordsmith radio series. So if you are a public radio listener, be sure to anticipate Grassroots and astroturfing on 2 episodes of Chrysti the Wordsmith. I'm not sure of the time. We may have some extra time for questions or comments.
Yeah, I think we do have some time for questions. That was so great. And I can't wait to hear the Chrysti the Wordsmith. And I've heard of the astroturf. That I love the juxtaposition there though.
Yeah.
So I see a couple comments, but yeah.
Chrysti, there was one other part when you were practicing this that included the history of the word root itself. If you wouldn't mind sprinkling that in.
Sure. All of us know the term radical, right? We have our opinions about what the word radical means. It doesn't always have a very good connotation. But the word radical comes to us from the Latin word, which means root. So radical means at the root of something. And I found a really interesting explanation of this term and its current meaning and how it's changed in one of my favorite sites on the online etymological dictionary. It says that the word radical came to our language in the late 14th century, and originally it meant originating in the root or the ground. Comes from the Latin radix, meaning root, and radish is also related to that term, radical. The figurative meaning of going to the origin or essential is from 1615, and the political sense of reformist is by 1817 of the extreme section of the British Liberal Party, radical reform, for example, via the notion of change from the roots. And the meaning of unconventional is from 1921, and it entered US youth slang from 1983 from the word meaning at the limits of control. So the word radical is also related to roots. Just thought I'd
that's great.
Throw that in as well. Yep.
Yeah, at the roots. That's marvelous. Any other questions? You can raise your hand and staff will help me find them, or comments. Edward Barta has a comment. Edward, why don't you come on?
Hi, Chrysti. I couldn't help but thinking about one of my favorite books that our book club has read not too long ago, and that is the Professor and the Madman.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that book? And it essentially is the origins of the Oxford English Dictionary, and in that book they talk about different words. Right, it's found to be a fascinating book and something that I think that you probably would be interested in if you have not already seen that book.
As a matter of fact, I've read it twice at least, and you'll see some books lined up behind me right here. And The Professor and the Madman is in that library of books. I encourage, like you do, anyone to read that book who is interested in words at all. It is an absolutely fascinating book, well written, well researched. It's completely true, but it reads like a mystery, doesn't it? The Professor and the Madman. Write that down. Anybody?
That's great. Someone will type that in the chat. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Edward, for that. Well, Chrysti, we are at time. This has been absolutely wonderful. I love diving into those key concepts and words of our work and life and mission, and that was so special. So thank you.
Thank you
so much.
And farewell, everyone. Have a good year.
Oh, and John Brown says we can do something about you not being a member. We'd love to have you join. Anyway, but thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Jeannie. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Hope to see you on the radio.